Hello. Okay, so second half of the class. Okay, so you guys are halfway through. All right, so let's see. Chat. Nope. What am I doing? Chapter 12. So sharing screen to put myself in the screen. All right. So second half of the class is a lot more fun. So we'll cover Unit 3 and parts of Unit 4. We're not going to be going through all of Unit 4. Okay, so evolution and diversity, explaining all the diverse things in life. Okay, so why study evolution? Okay, because evolution was based on a wide range of evidence. Okay, it offers a relation for life diversity, the features of seeing all the different organisms on Earth. Okay, okay. Evolution is genetic change over time. Evolution occurs when there are changes to inheritable traits from generation to generation. Okay, some of these changes will lead to the development of new species. Others will just lead to dead end changes. Okay. Okay. Evolution occurs in populations. Okay. Evolution does not occur in individuals, since an individual's alleles do not change. So evolution is a change in allele frequency over time. Once you're born, your allele frequency is set, right? So evolution only occurs in groups. Like one animal cannot evolve. It's not like Pokemon. Okay. Okay. So in a population, allele frequencies change from one generation to the next over time, over short. By one generation at a time, there's going to be small little changes in allele frequencies, okay, and they'll eventually build up to big changes, okay? Okay, so some alleles become more common in a population, others less common in a population, okay? Okay, so like here, this one's pretty easy. Allele frequency is calculated by the following equation, okay? The number of copies of allele divided by the total number of alleles for the same gene in the population. Okay, the gene pool for Sweden, okay, is obviously different than that in Asia. It's obviously different than that in South America. It's obviously different than that in Australia. Okay. Okay. If Swedish people, if there was a group of Swedes who all of a sudden all of them decided to move to Asia at the same time and interbreed with Asians, then that there will be all of a sudden there will be more blonde-haired, blue-eyed people in China. There will be those alleles will be more frequent in Asia or China, and therefore the allele frequency will change. Okay. Okay. So, okay. So the group of fir trees in Oregon is the only example that this is true because climate isn't evolution. A single organism like a fly or a fossilized turtle or even a cell in your own body does not evolve. Okay. Okay. All right. So many scientists contributed to the theory of evolution, even though we give all the credit to Darwin. There's actually a bunch of people who actually propose different things. And what Darwin actually proposed was a mechanism for how new species evolve, not anything else. Okay. All right. fossil discoveries began to reveal the life of history on Earth. Okay, geologists discovered that different rock layers reveal different groups of fossilized organisms. Many of them are now extinct. So this, in case you don't realize where this is the Grand Canyon. There are many, many, many layers of rock there. Okay, and each layer of rock will have slightly different fossils, and most of them, especially the ones near the bottom, are completely extinct, and we don't see any of those animals around anymore. Okay. All right. All right. Darwin's voyage provided evidence for evolution. So what Darwin did, okay, who Darwin was at the time, Darwin was actually something called a naturalist. He was his job on a boat. The boat was the name HMS Beagle. Okay, their job was to sail around the world, stop at different islands, and chart them. Okay, his particular job on the island was to whatever island they land on, chart the animals and birds and freshwater resources that he saw. So, if I land on island A from Darwin's notebook, I can know that there are these things that are edible, these sources of water that are drinkable, etc., 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 and like these things to avoid. Okay, so basically what he did was he realized he began to see a bunch of different animals on every island, and every island would be slightly different. And he started to kind of put things together on how they ended up differently. Okay, so Darwin saw that individuals and populations differ from one another. Okay, and then he read an essay by Thomas Malthus about food availability. Thomas Malthus was a brilliant mathematician, but he kind of theorized that eventually the Earth will run out of food for humans, and that this was going to happen soon. Like there wouldn't be enough food, everybody would be starving, and eventually there will be wars where people fight over food. Okay, he was wrong because humans learn to grow food better. He was right in that populations will eventually run out of food. Okay, we just haven't gotten there yet. We will at some point in the future, well, hopefully distant future, we will run into that, and food will become a scarce resource. Okay, but we're not anywhere near there yet. Okay, but he realized that in any population, individuals that cannot maintain adequate resources would eventually die. And so when Darwin read that, he applied it not only to humans, but to every animal. Every animal needs a certain amount of resources. If you don't have those resources, you die. Okay, that includes food, that includes fresh water, that includes mates, that includes like shelter, and all this other stuff, right? So every individual animal needs a certain amount of resources. And they're not able to get one or more of those resources, then they have a higher chance of dying than the ones that do. Okay. From this, okay, he realized every single bird was different. Okay, in a lot of islands, he saw a lot of different beak types. Okay, bring up the beak types. Okay, so right now, you guys are seeing the beak types here. Okay, beak types differ. Like to eat big seeds, you need big, strong jaws to break the seed. So the bigger the jaw, the bigger the seed that you have to eat. Okay, so they have to crush. Okay, catless eaters they need longer beaks. So their beaks are focused on being longer. So you realize this guy is longer beaks than this guy. Okay, because the beaks have to go in between the cactus little spikes, so they have to be longer and not powerful. Okay, um, if you want to catch your insects, your beaks can't be straight; they have to be curved to kind of to hold the insect and stuff. So capturing insects, okay, you need something called grappling beak. Like it has to be able to hold the animal as it wiggles, and then finally bigger kind of sharp things for fruit eating. Okay. Okay. So he saw all this and he realized every single island, you know, there's something really weird on every single island. Okay. So what he realized was, look, all these different birds must have came from the same ancestral place. And that place was actually South America. Because, he realized the islands were not gonna originally new like brand new stuff. So they must have came from South America in a storm and they blew out to sea and they eventually landed up on Galapagos Islands. But as he goes from island to island, what he saw were different birds, very similar, but different birds. And what he realized was each bird is perfectly adapted to that one small island that they were on, not any other ones. Okay, so some of these islands have like a lot of resources, a lot of fresh water. Some of these islands had a bunch of insects. Some of these islands had a lot of seeds. Some of them didn't have many, etc., etc. Okay, so he realized all this. Okay, from just moving from island to island. There's a reason why people like Darwin thought of the theory of evolution on islands. The other person who thought about it was Alfred Wallace, and he came to the exact same conclusion that Darwin did. Okay. 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 So we go back to our screen. Okay. So Darwin saw that the environment of each individual island influenced survival and reproduction of the finches living there. Okay. Finches are the features best suited to the environment were able to survive and reproduce better than the others. Okay. And that led to this concept of, so we also test this ourselves. Okay, artificial selection. Okay. So this is a mustard plant. You can see these in the wild a lot, but these are the same plants that lead to broccoli, cauliflower. Obviously, I mean, most of you guys can realize broccoli and cauliflower, same plant. Okay, but you don't realize broccoli, cauliflower, kale, cabbage, okay, Brussels sprouts, kohlrabi, like all of these are the same plant. Okay, and they all rise from the wild plant. And all we did was we acted like natural selection would work, but we did it by hand, so artificial selection. Okay. Humans can genetically alter allele frequencies just by breeding. Okay. Okay. So, and breeding pure breeds generally have issues. Okay. But we won't get into those. But dogs came from wolves, and we breed them to be kinder, gentler wolves, and eventually they turn into dogs. Okay. Okay. So the logic of natural selection, okay, within um, within the species, no two individuals are exactly alike. On top of that, at least some of this variation is heritable. Okay, like your scars are not heritable, but your genes are. Okay. Um, Natural selection deals with limited resources. Every habitat contains limited resources. Okay, and last but not least, overproduction of offspring. Okay, almost always there are more offspring born than are able to survive. So some offspring in every generation will not be able to breed, okay, or will not be able to reproduce. Okay. Okay. So some inferences that he made. Individuals will compete for the limited resources, and only some of them will get it. Some of them will lose. Okay. If there's only one piece of food, one animal will get that piece of food, another one will starve. Unequal reproductive success. So some animals are more successful than others. Okay. And it descent with modification. If you are reproductively successful, then your children will have your offspring and your genes, and therefore they will change the difference in population changes. Okay. All right. So Darwin, okay, and Wallace laid the foundation for evolutionary theory. So Darwin thought of it first to be perfectly fair. Okay, Darwin thought of this in the 1830s. He he didn't do anything about it because um, he realized whenever he spoke up, he would be hated by the Catholic, not Catholic, the Anglican Church because it contradicted a literal teaching of Genesis. Okay, um, so he kept a secret. He told his friends, and he did some, and he spent 20 years doing a lot of experiments on plants and stuff that confirmed this hypothesis, and he became pretty famous even without publishing this work. Okay, and along came Alfred Wallace. Alfred Wallace worked on the other side of the world. Okay, and he worked in Malaysia. And Malaysia, if you don't know what Malaysia is about 10,000 little islands. Okay, so he did the same type of research, same type of work, and came to the same conclusion that Darwin did. Okay, that species change over time, and what Wallace came up with the term survival of the fittest. Okay, so he figured that out. He wrote to Darwin. He said, "Look, what do you think about my idea?" Darwin, upon hearing his idea was exactly the same as Wallace's, knew he couldn't wait anymore. Okay, so he and Wallace came out with a scientific paper, published it. A year later, Wallace Darwin published his work on the origin of species, this book. Okay, and he published it and off the races. And that's when we started realizing that was the foundation for evolutionary theory. Okay. Okay. So there we go. Okay, and then off the races. Okay. So the evolutionary theory is supported by a large amount of data. So over the years, a large body of carefully conducted research on many fields have collaborated and expanded on Darwin's findings, including the most importantly, the genetics made by um, by Gregor Mendel and Thomas Hunt Morgan. Okay. Okay. Okay, so evolutionary theory continues to expand. Um, So we learn more and more about it, and so far everything is held up. Okay, large scale genome sequencing, etc., etc. Okay. So evolutionary theory is often misunderstood, and you'll see a lot of people who are like young Earth creationists, they will parrot this misunderstanding without actually thinking through. Okay. Biological evolution explains the origin of life. No, biological evolution did not begin until life existed. So evolution only deals with living things, not non-living things. Okay, evolution is a random process. Evolution is anything but random. There are certain things that are semi-random, like mutations and stuff, but natural selection is definitely not random. Okay. Okay. In a changing environment, all individuals in the population simultaneously change. No. Okay. Adaptations, changes in environment only occur in one person. If that person is successful, then that person has more offspring. More offspring leads to even more offspring being successful, and that eventually becomes fixed in the population. It is not instantaneous by any stretch of imagination. Okay. So clip number 2. Okay. A and B are both correct. Okay. 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 Natural selection does not create alleles. Instead, it strongly selects for alleles that arise by chance. Okay. So the seahorse's alleles produce a phenotype that allows it blending with environments, okay, which is useful for evading predators. Okay, this seahorse is alive because it looks like its environment, not because its environment looks like it. Okay. Okay, so natural selection requires genetic variation. Okay, so in that cloud of seeds, not every seed is going to grow and survive. That will not happen. In fact, it's far more likely that none of them will. Okay, or one of them will. Okay, so some individuals or populations are better than others to survive and reproduce. Okay. All right. Adaptations enhance reproductive fitness. Okay, so adaptations are heritable features that improve a organism's ability to reproduce. Okay. Fitness and hemolytic resistant bacteria. Okay. So let me show you actually. Okay. So we'll show you guys a video that explains what we're talking about much better than this. Okay. So.
Inflammation, low-grade inflammation is the under 90 to 95% of.
Yeah, that guy's crazy. Okay.
So we ended up.
So link okay.
The building was basically a petri dish, except that it's 2 feet by 4 feet. And the way we set it up is that there are 9 bands, and at the base of each of these bands, we put a normal petri dish thick agar with different amounts of antibiotic. On the outside, there's no antibiotic. Just in from that, there's barely more than the E. coli can survive. Inside of that, there's 10 times as much. 100 times, and then finally the middle band has 1,000 times as much antibiotic. And then across the top of it, pour some thin agar that bacteria can move around in. The background is black because there's ink in it, and the bacteria appear as white. First, you see they spread in the area where there's no antibiotic, up until the point they can no longer survive. Then a mutant appears on the right. It's resistant to the antibiotic, it spreads, until it starts to compete with other mutants around it. When these mutants hit the next boundary, they too have to pause and develop new mutations to make it into 10 times as much antibiotic. And then you see the different mutants repeat this at 100. And after about 11 days, they finally make it into 1,000 times as much antibiotic as the wild type can survive. And so we can see by this process of accumulating successive mutations that bacteria, which are normally sensitive to an antibiotic, can evolve resistance to extremely high concentrations in a short period of time.
Sure.